Here's a shorter one for you. Picture this. It's a dark winter evening in 1994. I've just come home from playing some football, and I finally plunk myself in front of my Packard Bell 486. I insert a CD-ROM that looks blank and has a lot of scratches. I then decide to try out a game in the War directory. It installs fairly quickly, and I'm graced with a title screen of Warcraft. Now, if I wanted to play another game like Warcraft, I had precisely one choice. There wasn't some indie scene letting me download similar games. There weren't any AAA publishers pumping out Warcraft-like games, as Warcraft itself was a baffled response to the question, why are there not any more games like this? Guess we'll make one. Since I had a PC, or Amstrad CPC to choose from, there were the choices of nothing or Dune 2, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. The only Dune game in my world was the original by Cryo, a game I regularly switched to and played instead of Warcraft due to its proto-RTS elements. If you look back at Warcraft and Dune 2, they're pretty simple games with archaic control schemes and samey graphics. Any indie developer worth their salt in 2023 could knock out something similar in a week, much like a YouTuber going for quantity over quality can knock out several videos in a week. Worthless! They don't create these type of games because RTS games don't sell in 2023, but they could create them if they wanted to. Much like how Lord British crafted a Calabeth back in the late 70s, it was the time and place and circumstances of their creation that made them special. It's one thing to take a look at a complex blueprint and be able to construct an equivalent and competing idea, like how Blizzard did with Westwood's Dune 2. It's another thing entirely to invent the archetypal game of an entire genre. Of course, Dune 2's ideas didn't come out of thin air. There were various turn-based war games from SSI, another Dune game being developed in France that I've already talked about, the frenetic Herzog's Vi from Japan, and the likes of Populous and Civilization already existing. But the most surprising influence was the GUI from the Macintosh OS. The idea of pointing and clicking and the mouse cursor getting contextual sparked something into life that would change the face of gaming. More importantly, the influences on these designers weren't exclusively other games. They didn't go, oh, we want to make it kinda like this RTS meets that RTS, because no RTS as we knew it existed. The developers at Westwood didn't set out to create a new genre, and for the entire year, nobody had really figured out that they had done just that. Their motivations were that they wanted to make something fun, that brought the frenetic real-time action to the heart of stodgy old turn-based wargaming, which was no longer in vogue by 1992 despite some quality releases. And it's when you look at the genres available to us that it becomes glaringly apparent how much of the groundwork was covered in the DOS era in terms of the creation of these archetypes. To illustrate this further, I've painstakingly stuck the year beside the inception of the genres listed in the Steam store, and the ones highlighted either originated on or were ported to DOS. Not only are there a surprising amount of games whose archetypes either were programmed or ported to the system, you'll also note that almost everything was started in the late 70s through to the 80s and 90s. This is not a startling or shocking discovery to many of us, but millions of people operating in these genres wouldn't know just how many of their genres started life on DOS, or at least in the same era as DOS. And if my conversations with work colleagues are anything to go by, a large chunk of those millions didn't even know that DOS existed. Where am I going with this shorter video? Well, if you lived through the 70s and 80s and 90s, you had more than just exciting new hardware as well as exciting new games and dozens of systems to choose from. You also had exciting new genres too, that you'd never experienced before. Sure, everyone has their first moment when they discover something, like in the 90s when I loaded up Warcraft, Heretic, Transport Tycoon, and Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis for the first time. All different developers, all gaming classics, and all completely different genres of games. So much of what gaming is now is a stagnant retread of what has come before. There are a few bright glimmers here and there from independent developers, but for the most part it's all covered ground with slight alterations. But it was an entirely different world back then, when seasoned players like my father got to experience the birth of entire genres. Generally in the modern age, if you've played around a bit, very little surprises you. Back then you could uncover a game that was praised all over because there simply wasn't anything like it. And journalists would scramble to explain and disseminate why this was the case, instead of being blatant advertisement mouthpieces. I miss that, and it's not coming back, because any brand new creations are simply variations on a theme, or repackaged versions of better games that came before.